Welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest, Justin Kan. You know him, founded Justin TV, Twitch TV. Your brother crushed it with that cruise, huh? What was that, like 18 months to $1 billion?
2 years. 2 years to $1 billion. And my brother, I remember he was telling his team member, new hires, he was like, this is going to be $1 billion startup in a year. This was 1 year in. He's like, this is going to be $1 billion startup in a year, and you want to get on board. And people joined, and later on, they're like, well, we didn't really believe you, but you know,
here we go.
It was amazing. Yeah. And
you were an investor in that.
I was an angel investor in that.
Nice.
And they are still, you know, in the city. Still run, you know, him and Kyle are still there running the company.
They got bought by GM or Ford?
GM. Yeah, they got bought by GM. They raised.
That's amazing.
They just raised over $2 billion, maybe $3 billion from SoftBank and others. And
wow.
Yeah, they're crushing it. It's crazy.
What's going to happen, the self-driving thing?
Well, I think a lot of people have said that they want to launch it pretty soon in the next year or so. So I think we're going to start seeing some experiments out there, or like hopefully consumer services. I don't know. I'm not really the expert, but I am eagerly anticipating for self-driving coming out.
I just had somebody on who's creating like mapping for all car companies, so they can all share the same sort of visualizations. DeepMap AI.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good business. I wanted to invest in a business like that, but
so it's sort of like Google Maps for everybody, or like TomTom or whatever, Garmin.
Yep.
But I thought what was interesting in the conversation, he talked about drawing a line in the middle of the road. So you have the 2-lane markers.
Yep.
But he's like, you know, if you draw a line in the middle of the road, specifically for this, like they're doing in China, it's really easy. And I was like, oh my God, we're spending $100,000 like arming a Waymo car to do this, or a cruise car or whatever.
Yep.
And literally you just paint
a line in the middle,
a neon line in the middle of the road, and tell
the car follow the line,
like a webcam, follow the line.
Yeah.
And you're done.
I know. I mean,
it's pretty hilarious.
You could put sensors, like actual sensors in the cities and stuff, and make it super easy too.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're going the hard way.
Can you imagine if like there was leadership in government and they just said, take the 5 freeway and draw a line from San Francisco to Los Angeles with whatever in the line, like some kind of technology with, you know, every 12 inches, some marker, or every 10 centimeters, every truck could be self-driving today.
Yeah, we would need to be like a different form of government, I think, to make this work. Or maybe not different form, but yes, benevolent dictatorship.
Benevolent dictatorship.
It's the best form of government until it becomes not benevolent.
Exactly. Well, it is interesting when I just got back from Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong or even Tokyo, any place that's a really dense city, they pen the pedestrians in. They literally put a fence so that cars and people are separated. So on the edge of the sidewalk, there's a fence.
Yeah.
And then people don't walk in the street and get hit by cars.
That would also be a solution.
If we just did this in San Francisco and Soma, like things would be so much more functional. Or in New York, they started to build them in Rock Center, and I think New Yorkers were like, no.
We need to be able to cross the street at any point along the sidewalk.
Yeah. What Y Combinator class were you in? You were in the classes that moved here after Paul moved it here. Because he did
we did this first one in 2005, actually.
Was it 2005?
Yeah, and so that was for our first startup, which is called Kiko. We didn't talk about that, but it was like a web calendar. It was Google Calendar, but much worse and 1 month early.
So you built a bad calendar a month before Google launched their free one.
Yes, and we also never used calendars because we were college students at the time.
So you didn't care about the product.
Exactly, and we didn't know what people wanted out of calendars. Like they wanted next.
Was that in Boston, or was that when he moved here?
In Boston.
Oh, you were part of the Boston class?
Yes, with Huffman from Reddit, Stephen Alexis,
And Dropbox was.
They were a couple years later.
A couple years later,
or 2 years later.
Who was in that first class? Can you remember at Paul Graham's apartment?
Yes. So Paul Graham had this apartment. Doesn't do it justice because he had a pretty cool building, 135 Garden Street in Cambridge.
Right.
And he so in that first class there were 8 startups. There was Sam Altman's Looped.
Right.
The location.
People forget
network.
that.
Yes.
Which got backed by Sequoia, bought by Google in a fire sale.
Green Dot. They sold it to Green Dot.
Oh, they sold it to Green Dot. Yeah, that was like an in-portfolio landing.
A little soft landing.
I'm not saying that there was a soft landing, but they guided him in. They guided him in.
Sam is an incredible, he's incredible at deal making and figuring out how to
Absolutely. I love Sam. Good card player, by the way.
Yeah. And then we had Reddit. Reddit. So Stephen Alexis from Reddit. They created Reddit.
Now Alexis is done Initialized Capital
He's now on to Initialized Capital.
and Miss Serena Williams.
Mr. Serena Williams.
Mr. Serena
Just
Williams.
had
That's a
had
full-time
kid.
job.
Yeah, it seems like
His social media is bonkers
his
now.
social media has blown up.
It's ridiculous.
He's a legit celebrity now in his own right.
I say he's launching a spirit.
He launched his own Armenian brandy.
I'm like, how am I going to keep up with this kid?
I haven't.
I don't.
You need your own spirit.
I know. What am I going to?
What kind? What's the Greek type of spirit?
That would be Uzo, I guess.
Don't launch it. That Uzo is not good. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's nasty.
I'm sorry.
I could do something Irish. I'm Irish too. So
Yeah.
I could do something on the Irish tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Irish.
But I saw that and I was like, really, Alexis? I can't wait to have him on and drink his spirit.
We should have some. You should have some like.
I'll put it on the wall. Yeah.
Put it on
Next
the
to
wall.
the Queequeg doll.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I think it's Queequeg. Anyway, he's
But
now got a doll.
His doll.
His daughter's got a doll.
His daughter's doll has blown up on social media. There's New York Times articles about his daughter's doll.
Now, is that all like part of a plan to release that doll as an actual product, or is that somebody else's doll that is getting free publicity?
Honestly, I have no idea, but
It's
I
pretty
hope
amazing.
it's the former.
Yeah.
I fear it's the latter.
So crazy. Isn't it weird? Like the internet went from being like
Like an afterthought to this
Yeah.
like driver of culture, and all these people who were random, kind of.
oh, here it is. Here's Quake.
Oh.
But you're saying yes,
All these random people like me and you and well, maybe not you, but like Alexis and Steve are like running the internet. It's amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah, that's bonkers. Quay now has 20,000 followers. Not his daughter's account. His daughter's doll's account. That's like 2 levels removed. That's bonkers.
It's amazing.
So that first startup just failed really quick.
We spent a year on it. We basically, after YC did a batch in the summer of 2005, we spent a year hacking on this calendar. We launched it. Google Calendar came out. We actually were very distractible founders, so we incubated all these other ideas that we never properly launched. The only good thing that came out of it was that I became a decent programmer because we basically did this. Think of it as like a year-long dev boot camp with, a programming boot camp.
With Paul Graham's $16,000.
Yeah, exactly. With his $12,000. So
it was $6,000 per head,
Yes.
right? So if you had 3 founders, you got 18.
We had 2 founders.
So you got 12.
And then he invested personally another like 20,000 to like keep us around.
I gotta say, I got a lot of respect for Paul Graham. You think about that. That was the bottom of the bottom. And he's like, I'm going to give a bunch of kids. Like you
Yes.
guys were babies, 22.
Yeah, we were 21,
21.
22, something like that.
I'm going to give him $12,000. Like he was like scraping the back of his couch to get like whatever he could to give you guys $12,000. That's like real heart.
I thank God for Paul Graham all the time because
Yeah.
he put us on, everybody on, all these guys who like had nobody would fund their companies. Their companies were an idea. We weren't even good programmers, to be honest.
And if you think about that cohort, like think about how much value got created just by like
Exactly, and that's the premise of Y Combinator.
Yeah.
YC has done such a tremendous job in the world of putting on all
Yeah.
these founders, right?
super inspiring.
Yeah.
And then you move out here, and then Justin gets accepted to a later class or something.
Yeah, so then we kind of went through again in 2007
Got it.
for as a second time.
And then you went through again, and then Atrium went through.
Yeah, so we had this after we pivoted fully to Twitch and Emmett became the CEO. After about a year, I started another company called Exec, which was a failure.
Oh yes, I remember
Yeah.
Exec.
It's kind of like
Exec was,
TaskRabbit meets Uber.
I thought that was pretty dope. $25 per hour or something like
That's
that.
right. We should have charged a lot more, but
Yeah.
it
What did you learn from that one?
well, I think it's really hard to make a service where people they have to be creative to use it. Right. I think because most people aren't that creative. I think what we should have learned was we should have pivoted hard to a specific thing, which we ended up doing, but we chose house cleaning, which is a horrible service in its own right. We should have pivoted to, grocery delivery, which is something that people were using.
Postmates or whatever.
Or
Like give them a
Postmates,
specific
yeah.
use case, which
Exactly.
TaskRabbit eventually did. They were like,
Yeah.
here, pick one of these 8.
That's right.
Because you can't. I love that idea though of like a $25 an hour
Aaron running
pre-vetted.
service.
Yeah. I see. But I think you're right. If you had gone $50 an hour, or let's say 40,
Yeah.
and you just said, forget it. This is like a 1%er thing.
Yeah.
We're going to start like Uber did, just with black cars. Like
Yep.
it's for the 1% or the top 5%,
Yep.
$40 an hour. But this person is super reliable, college educated,
Yeah.
and trustworthy and vetted, and they're stoked to do the work because it's a decent rate.
Yep. I think
great
that would have
rate.
been really an important thing to do. But unfortunately we didn't do that. And I think that we didn't really pivot to the right thing. We ended up selling that company to Handy,
Huh.
which just sold to Angie's List. So
When you rack up those kind of failures, how do you emotionally
it was hard.
balance that and deal with it? Because that one is kind of high profile, right? You raised a decent amount of money.
Yeah, we raised like a $3.5 million seed round.
Well, that's not
which
that
was,
much, yeah.
but it was a lot at the time. You know,
Yeah, it was,
a big seed round at the time.
It was high profile too.
It was high profile. I talked it up a lot,
Yeah.
and so it was hard. At the second year, when nothing was working, I felt horrible all the time. Went to therapy
Yeah.
to try to feel. I felt really guilty. I remember one time it was really failing, and I just broke down crying. I was like sobbing to myself. Well, actually, my co-founder was there, so it was a little embarrassing. But eventually we sold it, got over it. Life goes on.
It was just like, what have I done? I took all this money and
I made all these promises to all these employees, whatever. But what you don't realize is, look, life is going to go on. Your attachment to outcome is what will cause you suffering, right? Because if you have an attachment to a certain outcome and you actually get it, you're going to create a bigger attachment to a bigger outcome.
sure.
If you don't get it, you're going to be like in pain because you didn't achieve it.
Right.
And so I think that it creates this unhealthy cycle where, I spent so many years in this unhealthy cycle where I was like so obsessed with getting something next,
Right.
and thinking that was going to drive my happiness. And this was like kind of the peak culmination of that.
Did you grow up poor?
Not
Or
really.
middle
My
class?
parents, middle class.
Yeah.
My parents, they really emphasized education, so they put us in private schools and stuff.
Where'd you
So,
grow up?
Seattle.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it wasn't about like, oh, I need this because I need it to live. I always felt like I could get a job somewhere or something like
Got
that.
it. So it wasn't that fear.
It's more of like an ego-based
Ah.
attachment,
Yeah, that's interesting. And then you get a couple of check boxes. You get a couple checks. You get a
Yeah.
couple check boxes. It takes the edge off.
It
And you
does.
start-
I think it does. But I
Yeah.
also think that, you can also create these new attachments to even greater outcomes. When you're
Right.
you in the beginning, I remember thinking like when we just started Kiko, it was like if I could just make $1 million,
Ooh,
I will be set. That would be
for
great.
life.
And then, you
Done.
achieve that. We end up selling, Social Cam, 60 mil, so everybody got a little money in the bank. And then the bar just keeps going up and up. And then I had friends who created 3 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion, 20
Sure.
billion dollar companies. And then you're like, oh man, why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
And so
I
you
don't
could-
have a private jet. What? Oh.
Exactly. So there's infinite. You can always be looking up to somebody
Sure.
else who is doing better than you. And
Yeah.
it will never end.
That's the race to nowhere.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
unhappiness.
It's exactly. It's a race to unhappiness. So I know people look at me when I talk about like mindfulness and kind of like deleting your attachments from your mind. People they're like, well, it's easy for you to say because you got X, you achieved
Yeah.
this. But I'm like, look, I know you're not going to believe me, but I have experienced it all the looking up and all the way, I still do. I still have that.
Yeah,
instinct.
I mean, I do that sometimes too because you
Yeah.
hang out with people when you grow up in these circles like we did. You
Yeah.
just people around you become billionaires or other people who you thought were the smartest kids in the thing go broke, get divorced, and like they're taking a job at Yahoo,
Yeah.
and you're like, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh.
I
That's
think
rough.
you gotta, yeah, the thing I've learned the most in the past couple of years is that your happiness is an internal thing. It's not based on external events.
Yeah.
And focusing on that has been, I'm like more happy today, regardless of my external circumstances. It has nothing to do with my external circumstances than I ever have been in my adult life.
Yeah, and I know why. It's because you do your gratitude journal, which we're going to talk about
Exactly.
when we get back on This Week in Startups.